The day the stars went silent, Maria Santos was 6 years old. She stood in the observation deck of Lunar Station 7, her small hand pressed against the cold glass, watching the Earth turn slowly below. Her mother worked at the communications array, and Maria loved visiting her there. She loved watching the screens filled with strange symbols, loved hearing the soft beeps and chirps of messages traveling between worlds. But on that day, the beeps stopped. The screens went dark. And somewhere in the distance, Maria heard her mother scream. 300 years later, historians would call it the Day of Silence. They would write long books about it. They would study it in schools. They would build monuments to remember the moment when humanity learned a terrible truth about the universe. They were not welcome in it. The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years before humans ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what lived among the stars. It was a gathering of 17 species, each one ancient, each one powerful, each one absolutely certain of their place in the natural order of things. The Velthari hegemony controlled the largest territory. They were tall beings, with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed with inner fire. They believed in strength and order. They had conquered 100 worlds before they learned that cooperation was more efficient than war. The crystalline ascendancy came from a world of living minerals. They thought in patterns and mathematics. They saw the universe as a great equation waiting to be solved. Their ships were works of art, grown from crystal seeds over centuries. The minds of Ur had abandoned physical bodies long ago. They existed as pure thought, housed in vast computing structures that floated between stars. They remembered everything. They forgot nothing. They considered themselves the historians of the galaxy, and there were 14 others, each with their own history, their own culture, their own belief that they understood how the universe should work. When humanity first broadcast its presence into the void, these 17 species turned their attention toward a small yellow star on the edge of the galaxy. What they found there troubled them deeply. The humans were young. They had only just learned to leave their birth world. Their technology was primitive, their understanding of physics incomplete. By all reasonable measures, they should have been unremarkable. Just another species taking its first steps into the larger universe. But the Council did not see an unremarkable species. They saw something that frightened them. Ambassador Vethkal of the Velthari hegemony was the first to visit Earth. He came in a ship of black metal and red light, descending through the clouds to land in a field outside the human capital. The humans greeted him with music and ceremony. They offered him gifts. They asked 1,000 questions. They wanted to know everything about the stars, about other species, about the great civilization that waited beyond their sky. Vethkal spent 3 rotations among the humans. He walked their cities. He studied their history. He watched their children play. And when he returned to the council chamber, his report sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. They are an infection, he told the assembled representatives. They breed without restraint. They adapt without limit. They consume resources as if tomorrow does not exist. They have fought 1,000 wars among themselves and somehow survived every one. They ask questions that no young species should ask. They dream of things that should be impossible. The crystalline prime shifted uneasily. You speak of them as if they are a disease. Because they are, Vethkal replied. I watched their history. In less than 10,000 years, they went from simple tools to splitting atoms. In less than a century after that, they reached their moon. They do not grow at normal speeds. They do not think in normal ways. If we allow them to join the galactic community, they will change it. They will question everything we have built. They will spread across the stars like a fire through dry grass. The mind of Ur, who served as speaker, hummed with thought. Your fear is noted, Ambassador. But what do you propose? They are a sentient species. Our laws forbid their destruction. Vethkal's stone face cracked in what might have been a smile. I do not propose destruction. I propose something far more elegant. He outlined his plan. It was simple, clean, and devastating in its cruelty. The Council would build a barrier around the human system. Not a physical wall, but something worse. A sphere of warped space that would swallow every signal humans sent outward. A shell of distorted time that would destroy any ship trying to pass through it. From the outside, the human system would appear as nothing more than a dark spot on star charts, an anomaly to be avoided, a void where nothing lived. They will not be destroyed, Vethkal explained. They will simply be contained. Cut off from the stars they so desperately want to reach. Left alone with their own violent nature. And in time, without external resources, without room to expand, without any hope of escape, they will destroy themselves. It is what such species always do. The debate lasted for 30 rotations. Some council members objected on moral grounds. Others worried about the cost. A few even suggested that humanity might prove useful if properly controlled. But in the end, fear won. The vote was 12-5 in favor of containment. The Velthari, the Mines of Ore, the Crystalline Ascendancy, and 9 others agreed that humanity was too dangerous to join them, but too troublesome to destroy. The Sol Barrier, as it came to be known, took 50 years to construct. The Council's greatest scientists worked on it together. They bent space and time into a perfect sphere around the human system. They tested it 1,000 times to make sure it would hold. And when it was finished, they activated it without warning. Maria Santos was 56 years old when the barrier went up. She had followed her mother into communications work. She had spent her whole life sending messages to the stars, hoping for answers that never came. The Council had ignored humanity's calls for decades, giving polite excuses and vague promises. Maria was at her station when reality twisted. She felt it first as a pressure in her skull, a sensation like being underwater. Then her screens exploded with static. Every channel filled with noise. Every frequency went dead. She tried to send a message. Any message. But her signals bounced back at her, reflected by something invisible and impossibly vast. Across human space, the same scene repeated. Ships approaching the edge of the system simply vanished. Probes, sent to investigate, never returned. Scientists pointed their instruments at the barrier and received readings that made no sense. In one terrible moment, humanity went from being a young species reaching for the stars to prisoners in their own home. The panic lasted for years. Governments rose and fell. Wars broke out over dwindling hope. Some people gave up entirely, losing themselves in despair. Others raged against the sky, shaking their fists at stars they could no longer touch. Maria Santos did neither. She was 60 when she gave a speech that would change the course of human history. She stood before the United Nations, now renamed the United Earth Assembly, and spoke words that burned themselves into human memory. "They have caged us," she said, her voice steady and cold. "The galaxy looked at humanity and decided we were too dangerous to be free. They built a prison around our sun and left us to die. They expect us to rage. They expect us to break ourselves against the walls of our cage. They expect us to prove them right about what we are." She paused, looking out at the assembled leaders of human civilization. "I say we prove them wrong. Not through anger, not through despair, but through patience, through growth, through becoming something they never imagined we could be. They have given us a challenge. They have told us we are not worthy of the stars." Her voice rose. "I say we use every moment of our imprisonment to make them regret that decision. I say we become so much more than they feared. And when we finally break free, when we finally stand before them again, I say we show them what humanity truly is." The assembly was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the applause began. Maria Santos died at the age of 93, never seeing the outside of the barrier. But she had planted a seed that would grow for centuries. The first generation of imprisoned humans screamed at the void. They sent desperate messages that went nowhere. They built ships that disintegrated against the barrier. They wept for the future that had been stolen from them. The second generation stopped screaming. They started building. They poured their grief into research, their anger into innovation. If they could not reach the stars, they would master everything within their cage. They mapped their prison with obsessive precision. They studied the barrier from every angle, learning its properties, even if they could not yet break it. The third generation did not remember the stars as something they had lost. They knew only the barrier, only the silence, only the challenge their ancestors had accepted. They did not waste energy on grief. They worked, and something remarkable began to happen. Without contact with the galaxy, humans had to solve every problem themselves. They could not trade for advanced technology. They could not hire alien scientists. They had only their own minds, their own resources, their own stubborn refusal to die as the Council expected. They cracked fusion power within 50 years of the barrier's construction. They developed true artificial intelligence within 100. They learned to manipulate matter at the atomic level, to grow food in environments that should have killed it, to recycle every particle of waste into something useful. The Council had given them nothing but time and motivation. They did not realize what a dangerous gift that was. Deep in the research stations of Europa, a young physicist named Kim Soo-yeon made a discovery that would change everything. She was studying the barrier, as thousands before her had done, when she noticed something strange. The barrier did not actually seal their system completely. There were gaps, tiny imperfections in the fabric of twisted space. Nothing large enough for a ship to pass through. Nothing that could carry a signal back to normal space. But Kim saw something else. She saw dimensions. The Council built their barrier to block movement through normal space. They never considered that space might have other dimensions, layers of reality that existed beside the one they knew. The barrier extended through three-dimensional space, but it did not extend through these other dimensions. Kim spent 30 years developing her theory. She spent another 20 building the first experimental drive, and on the day she finally tested it, on the day a small probe slipped out of their prison and returned intact, she wept for joy. But she told no one outside her team. Kim Soo-yeon had learned the lesson Maria Santos taught. Patience, secrecy, preparation. If they could escape the barrier, they should not escape as desperate refugees. They should escape as something the Council could not imagine, could not predict, could not stop. The probe's return was kept classified at the highest level. Only a handful of people knew what Kim had achieved. They formed a secret council, a shadow government dedicated to a single goal, preparing humanity for the day they would return to the stars. They called themselves the Silence. For the next 100 years, the Silence worked in secret. They refined Kim's dimensional technology. They built ships that could slip between realities. They developed weapons that the Council had never conceived of. Defenses that operated on principles the galaxy did not understand. And they watched. They sent tiny probes through the barrier, gathering information about the galaxy beyond. They learned the Council's languages, studied their technology, mapped their territory. They discovered that the Council had never once checked on their prisoners. They learned that humanity had been completely forgotten, written off as a failed species that surely must have destroyed itself by now. This knowledge filled them with cold satisfaction. 300 years after Maria Santos watched the stars go silent, a fleet gathered in the shadow of Jupiter. 2,000 ships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one equipped with drives that could carry it through dimensions the Council did not know existed. Admiral Chen Wei-lin stood on the bridge of the flagship Prometheus, looking out at her fleet. She was the great-great-granddaughter of one of Maria Santos's students. She had trained her entire life for this moment. 3 centuries, she said quietly. They gave us 3 centuries to prepare. They thought they were condemning us to slow death. Instead, they gave us the greatest gift any species has ever received. Time to grow without interference, without limitation, without anyone telling us what was impossible. Her second in command, a man named James Okonkwo, nodded slowly. The council will learn what grows in silence. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They will learn, and they will never forget. She turned to face the bridge crew, men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. 300 years ago, they caged us because they feared what we might become. Today, we show them that their fear was justified, but not in the way they expected. She raised her hand. All ships, prepare for dimensional transit. Today, humanity returns to the stars. Across the fleet, 2,000 ships activated their drives. Reality bent around them, and one by one, they slipped out of the prison that had held humanity for 3 centuries. The silence was about to end, and the galaxy was about to learn what it had created. The first thing Admiral Chen Wei-lin felt when the Prometheus exited the barrier was surprise. Not at the stars, though they were beautiful beyond description. Not at the sensation of finally being free, though that made her heart pound in her chest. No. She was surprised at how quiet everything was. For 300 years, humans had imagined the galaxy as a busy place, full of ships and stations, and the constant chatter of advanced civilizations. The records from before the barrier spoke of trade routes, thick with traffic, of communication networks that spanned entire sectors, of a galaxy alive with the business of 17 spacefaring species. But here, on the edge of council space, there was nothing. Chen stood at the main viewport, watching the distant stars. Her sensors showed empty space for light years in every direction. No ships, no stations, no signals, just the cold vacuum of space and the indifferent light of distant suns. They really did forget about us, said Commander Okonkwo, standing beside her. Look at this. Nothing. No patrol ships, no monitoring stations. They built that barrier, and then they just walked away. Chen nodded slowly. They were that certain we would die. They never even bothered to check. It should have made her angry. Perhaps once, long ago, it would have. But 3 centuries of preparation had burned away hot anger and replaced it with something colder and far more dangerous. The Council's indifference was not an insult. It was an opportunity. Signal all ships, she said. Maintain silence protocols. We move as ghosts, until I say otherwise. The fleet spread out across the empty space, each ship activating the systems that had been built specifically for this moment. The silence drives could carry them through dimensions that the Council did not know existed, but that was only part of humanity's arsenal. They had also developed stealth technology beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The Council's sensors worked by detecting energy signatures, radiation patterns, gravitational disturbances. Human ships simply did not create these things. Their reactors were perfectly contained. Their drives operated in dimensional spaces that normal sensors could not perceive. To Council technology, the human fleet was invisible. Not just hard to see. Actually invisible. Dr. Helen Park, the fleet's chief scientist, had explained it to Chen before they left. The Council's technology is based on 12,000 years of shared development. Every species contributed. Every species benefited. But they all made the same basic assumptions about how the universe works. They never had to question those assumptions because they always had each other to confirm them. She had smiled then, the smile of a scientist about to share something wonderful. We had no one to confirm our assumptions. We had to question everything. And what we found was that the Council's understanding of physics is incomplete. Not wrong, exactly. Just incomplete. There are whole dimensions they have never discovered, whole aspects of reality they have never touched. Chen remembered nodding, understanding slowly. So, our technology isn't just different. It's outside their experience entirely. Exactly. They cannot see our ships because they do not believe our ships are possible. Their sensors are not designed to detect things that should not exist. Now, watching her invisible fleet move through Council space, Chen appreciated the full weight of those words. The Council had imprisoned humanity to prevent them from becoming a threat. Instead, they had created an enemy that operated completely outside their understanding. The first phase of the plan was simple: observation. For 6 months, the human fleet moved through Council space like ghosts, watching and learning. They mapped shipping lanes. They recorded military deployments. They intercepted communications and fed them to translation algorithms that had been developing for a century. What they learned confirmed everything their probes had told them, and added details that made Chen's jaw tighten with cold fury. The Council was not worried about humanity. The Council had forgotten humanity existed. In their official records, the Sol barrier was listed as a containment measure for a pre-warp civilization, showing signs of developmental instability. The barrier was maintained by automated systems that required no oversight. The human system did not appear on any current star chart. As far as the 17 species of the Council were concerned, humanity was ancient history, a problem solved 3 centuries ago and never worth thinking about again. Chen read these records in her private quarters, alone, so that no one would see her hands shake with rage. They had been people. Billions of people with lives and dreams and futures. The Council had erased them like correcting a mistake in a document. No guilt, no second thoughts. Just the quiet satisfaction of a problem neatly solved. "They will remember us," she whispered to the empty room. The second phase of the plan began 3 months later. It started small. A crystalline merchant ship experienced a strange malfunction in its navigation system and drifted off course for 6 hours before recovering. The crew reported seeing strange lights in the distance that their sensors could not explain. A Velthari military outpost lost communications for an entire day. When the systems came back online, every screen displayed the same image for exactly 1 second. A human hand. Palm open. Fingers spread wide. Then, nothing. The image vanished. The systems returned to normal. The Velthari commander filed a report that was lost in bureaucratic processes and never reached the Council. These incidents continued for months. Random, unexplainable, always minor enough to be dismissed as equipment failures or strange cosmic events. But each one was carefully planned. Each one designed to plant a seed of unease in Council minds. Chen called it the Whispering War. "We are not trying to defeat them," she explained to her senior officers in a briefing room aboard the Prometheus. "Not yet. We are trying to unsettle them, to make them question what they think they know, to prepare them psychologically for what comes next." Captain Sarah Oyelaran, commander of the cruiser Lagos, frowned at the display. "With respect, Admiral, this seems like a lot of effort for very little result. They're barely noticing these incidents." Chen nodded. "That is exactly the point. Right now, they are explaining these events away. Equipment failures, cosmic anomalies, space madness. Their certainty protects them from the truth, but each incident plants a small doubt. And when we finally reveal ourselves, all those doubts will bloom at once." She called up a new image on the display, a psychological profile of Council species developed by human researchers over decades. The Council has not faced a real threat in thousands of years. Their military exists to maintain order, not to fight wars. Their leaders have never experienced true uncertainty. They believe completely in their understanding of the universe and their place in it. Chen's voice hardened. "We are going to break that belief, not with weapons, but with fear. We are going to show them that everything they thought they knew was wrong. And then, when they are afraid and confused and desperate, we will offer them a choice." The Whispering War continued for 18 months. During that time, human teams conducted over 2,000 operations across Council space. Some were simple, like the communications disruptions and navigation failures. Others were more complex. A Velthari admiral returned to his flagship to find his personal quarters rearranged. Every object moved exactly 3 centimeters to the left. His security systems showed no intruders. His guards had seen nothing. The admiral requested a transfer to a different posting, and never spoke of the incident again. A crystalline research station studying advanced physics received a data package from an unknown source. Inside was a mathematical proof that contradicted fundamental assumptions their species had held for 8,000 years. The proof was correct. The researchers could not explain where it had come from or how anyone could have known what they were studying. A mind of Ur, one of the ancient artificial consciousnesses that guided their species, experienced something impossible, a gap in its memory. For exactly 17 seconds, the mind had no record of its own thoughts. This should not have been possible. The minds recorded everything. The affected mind entered a state of deep introspection and did not communicate with others of its kind for 3 years. None of these incidents were connected by council investigators. Each was treated as an isolated anomaly. Strange, but not significant. But among the higher ranks of council military and intelligence services, a quiet unease began to spread. Something was happening. Something they could not explain. Commander Silex of the Mines of Ur was the first to voice the suspicion publicly. At a council security briefing, the ancient intelligence displayed a map of all the unexplained incidents from the past 18 months. "Look at the pattern," Silex said, its crystalline thought matrices flickering with concern. "These events are not random. They cluster around military installations, communication hubs, and government centers. They target our psychological weaknesses with precision. They demonstrate knowledge of our systems that no external force should possess." High Admiral Vethrin of the Velthari hegemony dismissed the concern with a wave of his stone hand. "You are seeing patterns where none exist. Space is vast and strange. Anomalies happen. These anomalies know our security codes," Silex replied. "These anomalies rearrange furniture. These anomalies send us mathematics that prove our physics incomplete. These are not natural events. Something is testing us." The debate continued for hours. In the end, the council voted to increase security measures, but took no further action. The majority still believed in their understanding of the universe. They could not accept that something existed outside that understanding. Chen watched the recording of this debate from her quarters on the Prometheus. She smiled as Silex tried and failed to convince the others. "They are not ready yet," she said to Okonkwo, who watched beside her. "But they are close. A few more months, a few more whispers, and then we show them the truth." "Some of the crew are getting impatient," Okonkwo admitted. 300 years of waiting, and now we spend another 2 years hiding in the shadows. They want to fight. Chen turned to look at him directly. "Do they remember why we are here?" "Revenge," Okonkwo said simply. Chen shook her head. "No. Revenge would be easy. We could destroy their fleets tomorrow. We could burn their worlds. We could make them suffer the way our ancestors suffered." She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "But that would make us exactly what they feared. That would prove them right. Then what are we here for?" "Justice," Chen said. "And something harder than justice. We are here to change the galaxy, to end the cycle of fear that led to our imprisonment, to build something better than what exists now." She turned back to face him. "And to do that, we cannot simply defeat the Council. We have to break their certainty. We have to make them understand, really understand, how wrong they were. Only then can we offer them a different path." Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. "That sounds harder than revenge." "It is," Chen agreed. "But it is what humanity chose 300 years ago. Maria Santos could have called for revenge. Instead, she called for patience, for growth, for becoming something better than our enemies. We honor that choice by finishing what she started." The final phase of the Whispering War began 6 months later. Chen called it the Reckoning. It started with a message broadcast simultaneously to every ship, station, and planet in Council space. The message contained no words, no threats, no demands. It was simply an image. The Sol barrier, seen from outside, with the words, Remember US. Written across the void, in letters of light. The council finally paid attention. Emergency sessions were called. Fleets were mobilized. Investigators descended on every site that had experienced strange incidents. And slowly, terribly, the pattern that Silex had identified became impossible to ignore. Something had been moving through their space for nearly 2 years. Something invisible to their sensors, untouchable by their weapons, completely outside their understanding. And that something was connected to the prison they had built 3 centuries ago. High Admiral Vethrin demanded answers. The barrier is intact. Our systems confirm it. Nothing could have escaped. Nothing we understand, Silex corrected quietly. But what if they found something we do not understand? What if our barrier contained them in 3 dimensions, but they learned to move through 4 or 5? Or dimensions we have not discovered? The thought made several council members physically ill. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that they understood the universe better than younger species. The idea that humanity, the infection species, might have surpassed them was unthinkable, but the evidence was becoming impossible to deny. 3 days after the "Remember Us" message, a council patrol fleet investigating the barrier encountered something impossible. A single human ship decloaked directly in front of them, allowed itself to be scanned for exactly 10 seconds, and then vanished. Not jumped to hyperspace. Not activated stealth systems. Simply ceased to exist. As if it had stepped into a dimension the council ships could not perceive. The scan data showed a ship unlike anything in council records. Its power signature was off any known scale. Its hull was made of materials that council science said should not be stable. Its drive systems operated on principles that their computers could not even categorize. High Admiral Vethrin stared at the data for a long time. Then, he gave an order that had not been given in 3,000 years. Full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. His stone face showed no emotion, but his voice trembled slightly. The humans have returned, and they are not what we remember. Far away, aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Chen Wei-Lin received reports of the Council's mobilization. She had expected this. She had planned for this. How long until they assemble their full fleet? She asked. 3 months, her intelligence officer reported. They are calling ships from across their territory. It will be the largest military gathering in Council history. Chen nodded slowly. Good. Let them gather their strength. Let them feel confident in their numbers. And then we will show them that numbers mean nothing against an enemy they cannot see, cannot touch, and cannot understand. The whispering war was over. The real war was about to begin. The Crystalline Ascendancy's outer monitoring station Theta 9 had stood for 4,000 years. It was a beautiful structure, grown from crystal seeds planted by the first generation of crystalline spacefarers. Its towers caught the light of distant stars and sang with harmonics that only the crystalline people could hear. 12 crew members called it home, maintaining the sensors that watched the empty regions of space beyond Council territory. Station Commander Prism of Dawn was completing her evening meditation when the alarms began. She flowed through the crystal corridors to the main control room, her mineral body chiming with each movement. The other crew members were already there, gathered around displays that showed something impossible. Commander, said her second, a young crystal named Song of Depths. There is something approaching, but our sensors cannot identify it. Prism of Dawn studied the readings. The object was small, barely larger than a shuttle. It moved at speeds that should have torn apart any vessel, and it was heading directly for their station. Signal the Hegemony Fleet, she ordered. Request immediate assistance. I am trying, Song of Depths replied, his crystalline form flickering with distress. Communications are not responding. Something is blocking our transmissions. The object arrived before Prism of Dawn could give another order. One moment the displays showed it approaching. The next moment, it was simply there, hovering outside the station's main viewport. It was a ship. A small, sleek vessel, of dark metal and strange geometries. It had no visible weapons, no obvious propulsion systems. It simply hung in space, motionless, as if waiting. Then a voice filled the station, speaking in perfect crystalline harmonic language. "Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. But we need you to understand something." Prism of Dawn's crystal body rang with alarm. No external species should know their language. No external technology should be able to speak it properly. Yet this voice pronounced each harmonic with perfect precision. "Who are you?" she demanded. "We are the species you imprisoned 300 years ago. We are the humans. And we have returned." The crew members exchanged looks of confusion and fear. Most of them had never heard of humans. The Sol barrier was ancient history, barely mentioned in their educational programs. "That is impossible," Prism of Dawn said. "The barrier is intact. Nothing could escape." "Your barrier blocked movement through three-dimensional space," the voice replied calmly. "We learned to move through other dimensions. Your prison was never as secure as you believed." Before anyone could respond, the station shuddered, not violently, but gently, like a sleeping creature being lifted by careful hands. The displays went wild. Every sensor showed impossible readings. Reality itself seemed to bend around them. Then the station was somewhere else. The stars outside the viewport were different. The familiar constellations that had guided crystalline navigation for millennia were gone, replaced by patterns no one recognized. Prism of Dawn's navigation systems spun uselessly, unable to determine their location. "You have been moved approximately 17 light years," the voice explained. "Your station is undamaged. Your crew is unharmed. We have simply demonstrated what we are capable of." Song of Depths was trembling, his crystal form producing discordant notes of terror. "This is impossible. No technology can move objects faster than light without hyperspace drives. No technology can bypass our barriers. This is impossible. Many things you believed impossible are merely unexplored," the voice said. "We had 300 years to explore them. Your council gave us that gift when they chose to cage us, rather than learn from us." The human ship began to move away. As it did, communications suddenly returned. Signals flooded in from across council space, all carrying the same frantic message. Other stations were reporting similar incidents. Ships were being moved. Installations were appearing in the wrong star systems. And everywhere, the same words were being spoken by voices that should not exist. "Remember us, we are coming." Prism of Dawn stood motionless for a long time after the human ship vanished. Her crew looked to her for guidance, but she had none to give. Everything she thought she understood about the universe had just been proven wrong. The message she sent to the council was short and simple. They are not what we thought. They are not what anyone thought. May the stars help us all. Across council space, similar scenes played out hundreds of times over the following weeks. The humans did not attack with weapons. They attacked with demonstrations of power so absolute that weapons became meaningless. A Velthari battlecruiser, one of the largest warships in the hegemony fleet, found itself suddenly transported into the heart of a star. The crew had exactly 3 seconds of warning before their ship was destroyed. But in those 3 seconds, every other ship in the fleet received a message. "This could have been you. Remember that." A mind of Ur. An ancient artificial consciousness that had existed for 6,000 years, experienced something unprecedented. For 1 full hour, it lost access to the vast computing networks that supported its existence. When access was restored, the mind found a single file waiting in its memory banks. A complete history of humanity. From their first steps on their homeworld to the day they broke free of the barrier. The file ended with a question. "You decided we were too dangerous to live among you. Were you right?" The mind spent 3 months processing that question. It had no answer. A pleasure ship carrying the family of the Velthari counselor, who had cast the deciding vote for humanity's imprisonment, simply vanished. For 6 terrible days, the council feared the worst. Then the ship reappeared, exactly where it had been, with all passengers unharmed and deeply confused. They had been guests, they said. Guests of beings who looked like the primitive humans in ancient records, but spoke with calm authority and demonstrated technology beyond anything the Council possessed. They had been treated with kindness. They had been fed and housed and entertained. And they had been asked, over and over, to listen to stories. Stories of children who grew up watching their parents weep for stars they could never reach. Stories of scientists who spent their entire lives trying to break through a barrier they did not understand. Stories of generations born and died in a prison they had done nothing to deserve. The counselor's daughter, a young Velthari named Shenka, was forever changed by the experience. She returned to council space as an advocate for peaceful contact with humanity. Her father disowned her. The council labeled her a traitor. But her words spread through the population like fire. They showed me their history, she said, in a public address that was watched by billions. They showed me what my father's vote did to an entire species. They showed me children growing up in cages because we were afraid. And then, they let me go, unharmed, because they wanted me to understand something. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. They are not coming for revenge. They could destroy us. They have demonstrated that beyond any doubt, but they are not here to destroy. They are here to make us see what we did, to make us understand that our fear created something far more dangerous than anything we imagined. Revermander, withing our Washa. The council tried to silence her. They failed. Her message spread across every network, every platform, every form of communication known to the 17 species, and everywhere it spread, people began to ask the same questions she asked. Were we right to cage them? What have we created? What happens now? Admiral Chen Weilin watched Shenka's address from her quarters on the Prometheus. She had personally overseen the operation that captured the pleasure ship. She had personally chosen what stories would be told to the passengers, and she had personally made the decision to release them. It's working, said Commander Okonkwo, standing beside her. The council is fracturing. Half of them want to negotiate. Half want to fight. And they can't agree on anything. Chen nodded slowly. That was the goal. A unified council would be dangerous even to us. But a divided council, torn between fear and guilt, uncertain of what we want or what we're capable of, that council can be shaped. Some of the captains are concerned, Okonkwo said carefully. They think we're being too gentle. They remember what the council did to our ancestors. They want blood, and they shall have justice, Chen replied. But justice is not the same as blood. Blood would make us what they feared. Justice requires something harder. She turned to face him. Tell me, Commander, what do you think the council expected when they built that barrier? Okonkwo considered the question. They expected us to die, or to destroy ourselves. And if we had survived? If we had somehow broken free through brute force, with weapons and rage, they would have fought us, probably destroyed us. They have more ships, more resources, more experience. Exactly. Chen stood and walked to the viewport. The council expected monsters. Violent, aggressive, dangerous monsters that would justify their decision to cage us. If we attack them, if we burn their worlds and slaughter their people, we become exactly what they expected. We prove them right. So instead we prove them wrong, Okonkwo said slowly, understanding dawning. We prove them wrong. We show them a humanity that is powerful beyond their imagination but chooses restraint. We show them a species that could take revenge, but instead offers accountability. We make them question everything they believed about us. Chen's voice hardened. And in doing so, we break them more completely than any weapon ever could. The Council's military response came 3 months after the Whispering War began. High Admiral Vethran had gathered 10,000 ships from every corner of Council space. It was the largest fleet ever assembled, a show of force that had not been seen in 3,000 years. The fleet gathered at Nexus Prime, a massive space station that served as the Council's primary military hub. From there, they would sweep through the sectors where human activity had been detected, find the human fleet, and destroy it utterly. At least, that was the plan. Admiral Chen received reports of the gathering fleet with something that might have been satisfaction. "They are doing exactly what we expected," she told her senior officers in the war room of the Prometheus, gathering their strength in one place, preparing for a traditional military engagement. 10,000 ships, Captain Oyeleran noted. "Even with our technological advantage, that's a significant force. If we fought them traditionally, yes." Chen called up a display showing the Nexus Prime system. "But we are not going to fight them traditionally. We are going to show them that their understanding of war is as outdated as their understanding of physics." She outlined the plan. It was audacious. It was terrifying. And it was, her officers agreed, exactly what the situation required. The Council fleet launched from Nexus Prime 3 weeks later. They moved in perfect formation. 10,000 ships bristling with weapons, ready for battle. High Admiral Vethran stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against such might. He was wrong. The human fleet did not oppose them directly. Instead, Admiral Chen appeared on every screen in the Council Armada. She was calm, composed, almost friendly. "High Admiral," she said, "I appreciate you gathering your forces so conveniently. It will make this much simpler." Vethran's stone face cracked with rage. "You dare to mock us? We will crush you, like the insects you are." Chen smiled. 300 years ago, your predecessors said something similar. They were wrong then. You are wrong now. But I am not here to argue. I am here to offer you a choice." She held up her hand, and the display behind her changed to show the Council fleet from an external view. Around the 10,000 ships, small objects appeared, barely visible, numbered in the thousands. "Those are dimensional beacons," Chen explained. "We seeded them throughout this system months ago. Right now, they are synchronized with my ship. If I give the order, they will activate simultaneously, and your entire fleet will be displaced into 17 different dimensional spaces." Vethran's confidence faltered. "That is impossible. Dimensional technology does not work that way." "Your dimensional technology does not work that way," Chen corrected. "Ours does." "High Admiral, I am offering you a choice. You can order your fleet to stand down and return to Nexus Prime. You can inform the Council that a peaceful resolution is required. Or you can watch your entire fleet vanish into spaces that your scientists do not even know exist." The silence stretched across the Council Armada. 10,000 ships, millions of crew members, waited for their commander's response. Vethran made his choice. "All ships," he commanded, his voice hard. "Attack formation. Destroy the human fleet." Chen's expression did not change. "I hoped you would choose differently, but I cannot say I am surprised." She lowered her hand, and reality shattered. The Council fleet did not experience battle in any traditional sense. One moment they were in normal space, weapons charging, moving toward an enemy they could not see. The next moment, they were somewhere else. 17 somewheres, actually. Each ship found itself alone, in a space that did not follow the rules they understood. Some spaces were dark. Some were filled with impossible light. Some seemed to stretch forever, in directions that human and alien minds could not comprehend. Most of the ships survived. The humans had calibrated the displacement carefully. They were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were trying to break it, and they succeeded. When the dimensional beacons released their hold, when the surviving ships tumbled back into normal space, they found themselves scattered across a dozen star systems. Their weapons were drained. Their engines were damaged. Their crews were traumatized by experiences that defied description. Of 10,000 ships, fewer than 300 remained combat-capable. The rest were alive, but broken. Their crews unable to fight. Their commanders unable to lead. High Admiral Vethrin was among the survivors. His flagship had been displaced into a space of absolute silence, where no sound existed, where his own heartbeat seemed to disappear into nothingness. He had spent what felt like years in that silence, alone with thoughts he could not escape. When he returned to normal space, he was a changed being. The message he sent to the council was short. We cannot fight them. We cannot understand them. We must talk. 300 ships. That was all that remained of the council's mighty fleet. But the humans were not finished. As the survivors limped toward safety, 200 human ships materialized around Axis Eternal, the council's capital world. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply appeared, perfectly positioned, demonstrating beyond any doubt that they could have destroyed the heart of galactic civilization at any moment. A single transmission went out to the planet below. We wish to address the council. You have 1 hour to open your chambers. The council, for the first time in 12,000 years, had no choice but to listen. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin prepared to make history. The Grand Council Chamber of Axis Eternal had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were made of materials donated by each member species. Velthari stone stood beside crystalline mineral. Orion metals blended with the organic composites of a dozen other races. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. The floor was inscribed with the names of every species that had ever joined the galactic community. For 12,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Treaties had been signed here. Wars had been ended. The future of the galaxy had been decided countless times within these ancient walls. Now, for the first time in its long history, the chamber waited for a human. Coordinator Velthan of the Velthari hegemony stood at the center of the chamber, watching the other council members arrive. His stone face showed nothing. But inside, he felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine uncertainty. He had been young when the Soul Barrier was built. Barely a century old, still learning the ways of galactic politics. He remembered the debates, the arguments, the eventual decision to cage the troublesome human species. At the time, it had seemed wise. The humans were dangerous. Everyone agreed. Containment was merciful compared to the alternatives. 300 years later, Velthan was one of the oldest beings in the chamber. He had watched civilizations grow and fade. He had guided the hegemony through challenges that would have broken lesser leaders. But nothing in his long life had prepared him for what had happened to the Council fleet. 10,000 ships, the pride of galactic civilization, scattered like leaves in a storm by technology that should not exist. You seem troubled, Coordinator. Velthan turned to find the mind of Ur, that served as speaker, hovering beside him. The ancient artificial consciousness was housed in a sphere of silver metal, its surface rippling with patterns of thought. I am trying to understand what we are facing, Velthan admitted. The reports from the fleet survivors are difficult to believe. The survivors describe experiences that our science says are impossible. The mind agreed. They were displaced into dimensional spaces that do not appear on any of our charts. Some report experiencing alternative timelines. Others describe spaces where physics worked differently. The mind's surface flickered. One captain claims he lived 17 years in the space of 3 seconds. His memories are genuine. His body shows the effects of aging, yet his ship's chronometer says he was gone for less than a minute. Velthan felt a chill run through his stone form. How is any of this possible? The humans have discovered aspects of reality that we have not. 300 years of isolation gave them nothing to do except push the boundaries of knowledge. And with no one to tell them what was impossible, they found possibilities we never imagined. The other council members began to filter into the chamber. Representatives of all 17 species took their places in the rising tiers of seats that surrounded the central floor. Many looked afraid. Some looked angry. A few looked resigned. The crystalline prime arrived last, her mineral body chiming softly as she moved. She took her place beside Vel then, her faceted eyes reflecting the chamber's ancient lights. "They are here," she said quietly. "Their ships have been surrounding us for 6 hours. They have made no hostile moves. But they have also made no attempt to hide their capabilities. This is a demonstration of power. They want us afraid," Vel then agreed. "They want us to understand," the Prime corrected. "There is a difference. Fear without understanding is useless. The humans want us to truly comprehend what they can do. Only then will our choices mean anything." Before Vel then could respond, the main doors of the chamber opened. Admiral Chen Wei-lin walked into the Grand Council chamber alone. She wore no armor. She carried no visible weapons. She had no guards, no attendants, no technological displays to enhance her presence. She was simply a human woman of perhaps 50 years, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face marked by lines of age and responsibility. And yet, as she walked toward the center of the chamber, every being present felt her presence like a physical force. She stopped in the exact center of the floor, in the spot where petitioners had stood for 12,000 years, and looked up at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "I am Admiral Chen Wei-lin of the United Earth Command," she said. Her voice was quiet, but carried perfectly through the chamber's acoustic design. "I have come to speak on behalf of humanity." Vel then stepped forward, his stone form casting a long shadow. "Admiral Chen, you have demanded this audience through force of arms. Your fleet surrounds our capital. Your weapons destroyed our military. If you have come to dictate terms of surrender, know that the Council will never submit to conquest." Chen's expression did not change. "I have not come to dictate anything. I have come to offer a choice." "A choice?" The Velthari coordinator made a sound of disbelief. "You speak of choices after what you have done? Your people have terrorized our citizens. Your ships have violated our territory. Your weapons have scattered our fleet. What choice do we have, except to fight or die?" "You have more choices than you realize," Chen replied calmly. "You simply do not understand them yet. That is why I am here." She turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of each council member. Some looked away. Others stared back with hatred or fear or confusion. Chen noted each reaction, filing them away for later consideration. 300 years ago," she began, "this council decided that humanity was too dangerous to join galactic civilization. You built a barrier around our system, cut us off from the stars, and left us to die. You did not tell us why. You did not give us a chance to defend ourselves. You simply decided that we were too different, too aggressive, too troublesome to be allowed among you." Her voice remained steady, almost conversational. "I am not here to argue that decision. I am here to tell you what it created." A holographic display materialized around her, showing images that made several council members gasp. Human cities stretching across worlds that should not support life. Ships that moved through spaces the council could not perceive. Technologies that operated on principles their scientists did not understand. "You caged us because you feared what we might become," Chen continued. "You were right to fear, but not for the reasons you believed. We did not become conquerors or destroyers. We became something else entirely. We became a species that had nothing except time and determination. And we used every moment of our imprisonment to become something beyond your imagination." She let the images fade. "Your fleet is scattered. Your defenses are useless. Your weapons cannot touch us. Your sensors cannot see us. You know this. I know this. And yet I have not given the order to destroy your capital. I have not demanded your surrender. I have not even asked for an apology." The chamber was absolutely silent. "Do you know why?" Chen asked. No one answered. "Because revenge is easy," she said. "Destruction is simple. We could burn your worlds and still sleep peacefully at night, knowing that you did worse to us. But that is not why we are here. Aimon. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire chamber. We are here because 300 years ago, a woman named Maria Santos stood before the leaders of humanity and asked them to choose a different path. We could have raged against our cage. We could have torn ourselves apart in despair. Instead, we chose to grow, to learn, to become something better than the fear that imprisoned us. Chen looked up at Velden directly. And now, I am asking you to make the same choice. The coordinator's stone face cracked with emotion he could not hide. What choice do you offer us? We are at your mercy. Whatever you ask, we must give. No, Chen said firmly. That is not how this works. I am not here to take. I am here to offer. She raised her hand, and new images appeared. Human ships working alongside council vessels. Human scientists sharing knowledge with crystalline researchers. Human doctors treating patients of a dozen different species. Humanity is returning to the galaxy, Chen said. That cannot be changed. But how we return, what we become, what our relationship with your civilizations will be, those things are still undecided. I am here to tell you that we are willing to share everything we have learned. Our technology, our medicine, our understanding of dimensions you have never explored. All of it. The images shifted again, showing the Sol barrier dissolving, showing human ships traveling freely among the stars, showing a galaxy transformed by cooperation instead of fear. 300 years ago, you looked at humanity and saw a threat. You saw our aggression, our rapid growth, our endless curiosity, and you decided we were too dangerous to exist among you. You were wrong. We were only dangerous because you made us so. Left to our own path, we would have joined your civilization as friends, as partners, as fellow travelers in the vast universe. Chen's voice hardened. Instead, you created this. You created a humanity that has nothing to fear from you because we have become something you cannot defeat. You created an enemy more powerful than anything you have ever faced. And you did it through fear and arrogance, through the belief that you knew better than us what we should be. She paused, letting her words sink in. I am here to give you a chance to undo that mistake. Not because you deserve it, not because we have forgiven you, but because we refuse to let fear define the future of the galaxy. We choose a different path. We choose cooperation over conquest, understanding over vengeance, growth over destruction. The images faded. Chen stood alone in the center of the chamber, small against the vast scale of the ancient room. But I will not force that choice on you. The Council caged humanity because they believed they had the right to decide our future. We will not repeat that error. Your civilizations must choose freely. You must decide whether to accept humanity as partners or to continue seeing us as enemies. She turned to face Velden directly. The Sol barrier falls today. Our ships will move freely through the galaxy from this moment forward. We will open diplomatic channels with any species that wishes to communicate. We will share our technology with any civilization that asks. We will do everything you feared we might do 300 years ago. And if we refuse? Velden's voice was barely a whisper. If we choose to see you as enemies? Chen's smile was small and sad. Then we will wait. We learned patience in your cage. We can learn it again. But I suspect you will not refuse. You have seen what we can do. You understand that war between us would be short and devastating. More importantly, you have had 3 centuries to live with the consequences of your choice. I am offering you a chance to make a different one. She began to walk toward the chamber doors, then stopped and turned back. I want to be clear about something. We are not saints. We are not perfect. We are angry and hurt, and we carry scars that will take generations to heal. Some among us wanted nothing more than to watch your civilizations burn. It took great effort to choose this path instead. Her voice dropped, becoming almost intimate, despite the vast space. But we made that choice because we believe the galaxy can be better than it is. We believe that the fear that led to our imprisonment does not have to define the future. We believe that species that start as enemies can become friends. We believe in second chances. We, too, she straightened, her posture shifting back to the formal bearing of an admiral. The Council imprisoned humanity because they believed we were too dangerous to exist among them. They were wrong. We were only dangerous because they left us no other choice. Now we offer you a different choice. Chen looked around the chamber one final time. Do not waste it. We will not offer it again. She walked out of the Grand Council chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence she left behind. For a long moment, no one spoke. The 17 species of the Galactic Council looked at each other, looked at the empty space where the human had stood, looked at the future she had offered them. Vel then was the first to move. He walked slowly to the center of the chamber, to the spot where Chen had stood, and looked up at his fellow council members. 300 years ago, he said slowly, we made a decision out of fear. We told ourselves it was wisdom. We told ourselves it was mercy, but it was fear. Fear of something we did not understand. Fear of change. Fear of a species that asked questions we could not answer. He turned in a slow circle, just as Chen had done. Today, we face the consequences of that fear. We have seen what it created. We have felt its power. And now, we must decide what to do next. The mind of Ur spoke first. She is right. We cannot defeat them. Our technology is generations behind theirs. Our military is broken. Our only options are cooperation or slow decline. And you trust them? The question came from the representative of the Thermal Collective, a species of beings made of living heat. They have shown us nothing but power. How do we know their offer is genuine? Every Pening, one. We do not know, Velden admitted. But that is the nature of trust. We did not trust humanity 300 years ago, and we created this situation. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender unconditionally. Most fell somewhere in between, uncertain and afraid. But slowly, a consensus began to form. The council had made a mistake. A terrible mistake that had nearly cost them everything. Now they had a chance to correct it. To build something new from the ashes of their arrogance. When the vote was called, it was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Council voted to accept humanity as equal members of galactic civilization. They voted to open diplomatic relations and share knowledge and begin the long process of building trust. They did not do these things because they were no longer afraid. They did them because they finally understood that fear had never been wisdom. Outside the chamber, aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Chen Wei-Lin received word of the Council's decision. She closed her eyes for a long moment, feeling the weight of 3 centuries lift from her shoulders. It's done, she said quietly. It's finally done. Commander Okonkwo stood beside her. What happens now? Chen opened her eyes and looked out at the stars. Stars that humanity could finally touch again. Stars that belong to everyone. Now, she said, we build something better. Together. The Sol barrier fell at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Across the human system, billions of people gathered to watch. They stood on rooftops, and in parks, in space stations, and on the surfaces of moons. They held hands with their families. They wept. They laughed. They stared at the sky and waited for something they had dreamed about for 300 years. Dr. Sarah Chen was 107 years old. She was the great-granddaughter of Admiral Chen Wei-lin, born in the final years of the imprisonment. Too young to remember the silence but old enough to have studied its history for her entire life. Now she stood in the observation deck of Earth Station Prime, watching as the barrier that had trapped her species began to dissolve. It did not explode or shatter. It simply faded, the invisible walls becoming thinner and thinner until they were gone entirely. Where there had been a prison, there was now only open space, open stars, an open universe. "It's beautiful," whispered the young woman, standing beside Sarah. Her name was Maria Santos Chen, named for the ancestor who had helped humanity choose hope over despair 3 centuries ago. She was 20 years old, and she had never known anything except life inside the barrier. "Yes," Sarah agreed, her old voice cracking with emotion. "It is." Across the human system, the same scene repeated itself. Families embracing, strangers celebrating in the streets, children asking questions. Their parents could finally answer. "What are the stars like up close? Are there really other species out there? Can we go see them?" Yes. The answer was finally yes. The first ships crossed the former barrier line just minutes after midnight. They were not warships but exploration vessels, small craft packed with scientists and diplomats and ordinary citizens who had waited their entire lives for this moment. They spread out in all directions, each one carrying humanity's first free steps into the galaxy. Admiral Chen Wei-lin watched them go from the bridge of the Prometheus. She was tired, more tired than she had ever been in her long life. But she could not look away. This was what she had fought for. This was what her ancestors had sacrificed everything to achieve. "Admiral," Commander Okonkwo's voice was gentle. "You should rest. The hard part is over." Chen shook her head slowly. "The hard part is just beginning. We have ended the imprisonment. Now, we must build the peace." She was right, of course. The Council's vote had opened the door, but walking through it would take years of careful work. The first challenge was trust. 300 years of imprisonment had left deep scars on humanity. Many people remembered stories passed down from ancestors who had watched the barrier go up. They remembered the fear, the confusion, the rage of being caged like animals. They had grown up knowing that the galaxy saw them as dangerous, as infection, as something to be contained, rather than welcomed. Not everyone was ready to forgive. The Human Liberation Front formed within weeks of the barrier's fall. They were a small group at first, just a few hundred people who rejected the Council's offered peace. They called Admiral Chen a traitor. They demanded that humanity take what was rightfully theirs by force. They wanted revenge, not reconciliation. Chen addressed them personally in a broadcast that reached every corner of human space. "I understand your anger," she said, her face showing every year of her age, every moment of strain from the conflict. "I feel it too. The Council did terrible things to our ancestors. They caged us. They forgot us. They expected us to die. And now they offer peace because they have no choice. Because we have become too powerful to ignore." She paused, letting her words settle over her audience. "But consider this. 300 years ago, Maria Santos stood before our ancestors and asked them to choose a different path. She could have called for revenge. She could have demanded that we tear ourselves apart trying to break free. Instead, she asked us to grow, to learn, to become something better than the fear that imprisoned us." Her voice grew stronger. "We honored her choice. We spent 3 centuries preparing not just to escape, but to return as equals. Not as conquerors, but as something the galaxy had never seen. A species that could have taken revenge but chose to build instead." Chen leaned forward slightly, her eyes intense. "If we abandon that choice now, we prove the Council right. We become exactly what they feared. We throw away everything our ancestors worked for." She straightened. "I will not do that. Humanity will not do that. We will build peace, not because the Council deserves it, but because we do. The Human Liberation Front did not disappear, but it did not grow either. Most people, it seemed, shared Chen's vision. They wanted to explore the stars, not burn them. The second challenge was integration. Humanity's technology was centuries beyond what the Council possessed. Their dimensional drives, their energy systems, their medical advances, their artificial intelligences were all based on principles the Council's scientists barely understood. Sharing this technology raised complicated questions. Would it be fair to give everything at once? Would it destabilize galactic civilization? Would species that received human technology become dependent on it, losing the ability to innovate themselves? A joint committee was formed to address these questions. Human scientists worked alongside representatives from all 17 Council species, carefully designing programs to share knowledge without creating dependency. It was slow work, frustrating at times, but it was also hopeful. For the first time in galactic history, species were cooperating not out of fear or necessity, but out of genuine desire to build something better. Dr. Kim Park, the great-great-grandson of the scientist who had first cracked dimensional travel, led the human delegation. He spent his days in endless meetings, explaining concepts that seemed obvious to him but revolutionary to his audience. At night, he wrote letters to his children back on Earth, telling them about the strange and wonderful beings he was meeting. "The crystalline don't think the way we do," he wrote in one letter. "Their minds work in patterns that I can barely understand. But when I showed them the mathematics behind our dimensional drives, one of them actually sang. Not words, just pure music. She said it was the most beautiful equation she had ever seen." He smiled as he wrote the next line. "I think we're going to be friends." The third challenge was memory. Humanity had spent 300 years building a culture around their imprisonment. Their art, their music, their literature, their very identity was shaped by the experience of being caged. Now that the cage was gone, they had to decide what to do with all that history. Some wanted to forget. They argued that dwelling on the past would only keep old wounds open. Better to look forward, they said, to focus on building the future rather than mourning the past. Others wanted to remember. They pointed out that the lessons of the imprisonment were too important to lose. Future generations needed to understand what had happened, both so they could appreciate what had been overcome and so they could prevent it from ever happening again. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Soul Barrier Memorial was constructed at the exact point where the barrier had been strongest. A massive structure floating in space, visible from Earth on clear nights. It contained records of every person who had lived and died during the imprisonment. It held artwork and music and literature created during those 3 centuries. It told the story of humanity's imprisonment and their emergence, not as a tale of victimhood but as a story of endurance and growth. The memorial's central chamber contained a simple message, inscribed in every human language and in the languages of all 17 Council species. Here stood the wall that divided us. Here began the bridge that connects us. Remember the silence. Choose the conversation. Years passed. Then decades. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. Dimensional travel became common as human technology spread. Species that had been separated by vast distances found themselves neighbors. Trade routes that had taken months now took hours. The universe became smaller, more connected, more alive with possibility. Old conflicts began to fade. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in the shared project of exploration. The questions that had once divided them seemed less important when there were new dimensions to discover, new phenomena to study, new wonders to experience together. Humanity spread across the stars as Maria Santos had dreamed. They built colonies on worlds that Council species had considered uninhabitable. They created art that drew from a dozen different cultures. They asked questions that no one had thought to ask before, but they did not conquer. They did not impose. They remembered the lesson of their imprisonment and refused to repeat the mistakes of those who had imprisoned them. Admiral Chen Wei-lin died at the age of 137. Her mind sharp until the very end. Her last words, recorded by her grandson at her bedside, became famous across the galaxy. "We chose well," she whispered, her eyes still focused on the stars visible through her window. Remember that. When you face hard choices, remember that we chose patience over revenge, growth over destruction, peace over war. And look at what we built. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the galaxy. The crystalline prime, ancient beyond human comprehension, spoke of how humanity had transformed galactic civilization. The mind of Ur, that had opposed humanity's imprisonment 3 centuries ago, finally felt vindicated. Even the descendants of those who had voted for the barrier came to pay their respects. Velthan, the Velthari coordinator who had faced Chen in the Grand Council chamber, sent a message that was read aloud at the ceremony. He had died decades earlier, but he had recorded it, knowing that Chen would outlive him. To Admiral Chen Wei-lin, the message said, "You came to us as an enemy and left as a teacher. You had the power to destroy us and chose instead to challenge us. You made us better by showing us how wrong we had been. I spent my final years trying to live up to your example. I hope I succeeded. And I hope, wherever you are now, you know that the galaxy remembers. We will never forget the lesson you taught us." The message ended with a single word in the human language: "Thank you." 100 years after the barrier fell, a celebration was held across the galaxy. It was called Reunion Day, a recognition of the moment when humanity had returned to the stars. But it was not just a human holiday. Every species participated, each one marking the day in their own way. On Earth, Dr. Maria Santos Chen, now an old woman herself, gave a speech at the Soul Barrier Memorial. Billions watched from across the galaxy. 100 years ago, my great-grandmother led humanity back to the stars. She could have come with fire and rage. Instead, she came with an offer of peace. She could have demanded revenge for 3 centuries of imprisonment. Instead, she demanded only that we be given a chance to prove who we truly are. Maria looked out at the crowd, at humans and aliens standing side by side, and smiled. "I think we have proven it. Look at what we have built together. Look at the worlds we have explored, the discoveries we have made, the friendships we have formed. This is what happens when species choose trust over fear, cooperation over conflict, hope over despair." She raised her hand toward the stars. "My ancestor, Maria Santos, for whom I am named, once told humanity that we should prove our imprisoners wrong. She said we should become something greater than they imagined, something better than their fear." Her voice swelled with pride and joy. "I believe we have done that. And I believe we are only beginning. The universe is vast beyond comprehension. There are dimensions we have not explored, phenomena we do not understand, questions we have not yet learned to ask. The journey ahead is longer than anything we can imagine." She lowered her hand and smiled. "But we will walk it together. Human and Velthari and Crystalline and Orion and all the others. Not as conquerors and conquered, not as imprisoners and imprisoned, but as partners, as friends, as fellow travelers in the infinite story of existence." The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the galaxy. Far above Earth, in the space where the Sol Barrier had once stood, the memorial station hung in darkness. Its lights pulsed gently, a beacon visible for light years in every direction. And on its surface, the inscription glowed with soft light. "Here stood the wall that divided us. Here began the bridge that connects us. Remember the silence. Choose the conversation." The council had fallen, not in fire or blood, but in shame and transformation. Their old ways had crumbled, replaced by something new and hopeful and alive with possibility. And humanity, The species they had tried to erase had led them there, not through conquest, not through revenge, but through the simple, powerful choice to be better than the fear that had tried to destroy them. The galaxy had changed forever, and this was only the beginning.